Hello, this is a music arts ranking video and it's a review of music. It's my top 10 Jethro Tull albums, one of my favourite bands. I've narrowed it down to 10 because I do tend to ramble on a bit on these videos. But I hope that won't put you off watching. I have to sort of give a hats off to albums that I've not included, some of which are regarded by many as required listening, such as Stand Up and Benefit. Not that I don't like them, I love them, but they're not my favourites. I like some other albums more. Also Minstrel in the Gallery, Stormwatch, some of the 80s and 90s albums I haven't included for the same reason. Zealot Gene nearly made my top 10. So hats off to that too. Now Jethro Tull are generally regarded or labelled as a prog rock band or a progressive rock band. But that's because, well, the reason for that is that there isn't really a category you can put them in. Like Frank Zappa, that's the same. He can't be really classified or categorized. And progressive rock is a kind of broad enough genre, ostensibly genre. Probably the broadest, or most eclectic musically. And so it's kind of become a suitable label for all sorts of bands who are some way unique or distinctive. Now Jethro Tull started in 1968 making records. They may have made some in 1967. And I've had a lot of lineup changes too. But let's get on with the top 10. No one will agree with my choices or my ranking. They're not really ranked against one another particularly. They're all special albums, and so I have to say the disclaimer, just my opinion. You might have a different opinion, that's perfectly fine. We start anyway with number 10, War Child. I can't believe I'm only putting this at number 10. I must be mad, but I do prefer some other albums to this, and it's a marvellous album. It was the kind of remnant of what was meant to be a movie entitled War Child and Musical Fantasy, which was cancelled before it was made. And the reason for that is, as I've read anyway, that there were financial problems in that it turned out that the banks were going to get more of the money than the band from it, and so it was immediately scrapped. It contains sort of the again the diaspora of the Chateau de Disaster music, the Chateau Disaster music, Chateau Disaster tapes were an attempt in a French chateau to record an album, but the band wasn't satisfied with it. They ended up scrapping it and returning to other studios and making a couple of albums, including this one. but it does have rewritten, reworked music from those tapes, which I'll mention again later. The songs are terrific. All the songs of Jethro Tull are great. I like them all. And this one, it's a lavish sort of album. It has a variety of different tempos and structures of songs. It has some quite folky bits, it has some heavy proggy bits. Starts off with the title track War Child, which is rather interesting for having this saxophone. It's reminiscent of lounge jazz. Sort of harks back to the war and post-war jazz music, a la Glenn Miller and other artists. There's a theme played on saxophone, and the changes in tempo in it, and Ian Anderson sings, "I'll take you down to that bright city mile, there to powder your sweet face and paint on a smile." Beginning the album in terms of vocals, great singing performance throughout. The lyrical theme of the War Child is repeated on the second to the last track, which kind of lends it a sort of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band structure, which has a reprise of the first track before the last finale track. This has a similar structure. In many ways, it is a successor to the Beatles record because there are carefully introduced sound effects and other effects, and even, for example, even voices. For example, at the beginning, there's a siren, an air raid siren, and then you get a couple of voices asking if somebody wants a cup of tea, and it's kind of amusing, really. The opposite of Black Sabbath's War Pigs, I suppose. As for the War Child idea, I don't really know what it refers to. Perhaps it means music, post-war music, leading to the influx of American style, rock and roll music, blues, and so on, which is in the background of this band. I think that's about all I need to say about this. My favourite track, I think, is Backdoor Angels. Great song. Great musicianship on it. It's a classic lineup. Barrymore Barlow on the drums, Jeffrey Hammond on bass, and John Evan on keyboards. And it's a lot of fun. The bonus tracks on this CD issue are a lot of fun, and there's some great songs as well, which could easily have gone in the album. But without further ado, we'll go on to the next one. Excuse me. Right. The next one, I've only got a card cover of this. I haven't got the proper CD case. I've got the vinyl. Rock Island, jumping forward into the 80s, different lineup. And what, you say? He's committing hubris again, putting this above War Child, but it does hang together. It's much more focused as an album. And the interesting thing about this is that it is what the previous album, Crest of a Knave, got a Grammy for not being, so to speak. It's mostly a hard rock album, whereas Crest of a Knave wasn't, and yet it got the Grammy Award for the best hard rock oblique stroke metal performance of the year. Excuse me. Well, this kind of delivers that, which is interesting, and it's very pleasant too. Great songs. There's a great sort of melodic cohesion to the album. Martin Barr's exceptional on it, on his guitar, electric guitar. Some great songs. Kissing Willie, of course, which people criticise because it's just a bawdy song, but hey, if you can't do bawdy songs now and again in music, where are we? Where are you? What can you do? Anyway, Rattlesnake Trail with a slidey sort of guitar riff. Ears of Tin, Working Girl, the title track Rock Islands, dramatic. A couple of big power chords, or what sound like power chords in there. Heavy Water, great melodic, cohesive song there, and my favourite track I think is Whaler's Due, which kind of presents the case of the whaler. I mean, people are always railing against the whale hunters. You know, it's inhumane and it endangers a species and so on, which is it's understandable, of course, understandable. But in the song, Ian Anderson writes that and sings that you know, these guys have to make a living. So it's sort of an anti-hero point of view, I suppose. And there's some great flute and guitar interplay in the solo bits, sections. Powerful sort of swooping, ascending bass line from David Pegg. Well, Jethro Tull were always being an authentic band. Another reason why they're labelled as prog rockers, I suppose. They rarely plug into the mainstream, if you like. So they're not like Status Quo or AC/DC, but they're still a good rock band. Anyway, that's another one, Rock Island. My third one, or number 8. Number 8 is the debut album, This Was. Mick Abrahams on This Was. The first Jethro Tull guitarist. A blues guitarist from Luton. And he was great. It took Martin Barr, I think, a while before he found his feet, after he had to fill his shoes. But it's a blues album, but it's a bit broader than the usual blues album. It's certainly broader than the first Fleetwood Mac album. There's not just rock blues on it. There's jazz blues and folk blues. And then there's some departures, really. They're departures within the blues. I suppose it's a sort of thing, sort of things that were regarded as permissible for a blues band to do. Great opener, My Sunday Feeling, Clive Bunker on the drums, probably the most virtuoso drummer Jethro Tull have ever had. I mean, Barrymore Barley was very musical, with a great drummer as well. Perhaps now more famous than Clive Bunker, though Clive Bunker was very famous in his day. And all the other drummers were great, but Clive Bunker was definitely a virtuoso, inspired by Ginger Baker sort of drummer. Glenn Cornick on bass. And of course, Ian Anderson with his flute and harmonica and his vocals. He'd only been playing flute for a short length of time, maybe a few months. It was amazing. He's always been amazing. He seems to pick up instruments and use them very quickly and in a distinctive way. Well, that seems to be the pattern of things. But there we have it. This was the initial album, 1968, blues album, blues rock album, whatever. Fantastic songs. My Sunday Feeling. Someday the Sun Won't Shine for You, Beggar's Farm. There's a Roland Kirk Serenade for the Cuckoo, or is it To a Cuckoo? Serenade to a Cuckoo. Dharma for One. Instrumental with a Clive Bunker drum solo. And It's Breaking Me Up, Woman. Or is it just Breaking Me Up? It's Breaking Me Up. He sings It's Breaking Me Up, Woman. I think that's my favourite track. It's a straightforward blues song written by Ian Anderson. There's a great electric guitar foil. Song for Jeffrey. That kind of unique song structure that was going to project them into the future. And Cat Squirrel, which was also on the Cream's first album. This slightly different rendering with Mick Abraham's guitar soloing for all he's worth. Okay, so this was. The next one is something that I'm sure everyone will be surprised about. It's the album which people generally put to the bottom of their list or rankings of Jethro Tull albums. But I like it. I love it a lot. And it's, of course, Under Wraps, the maligned Under Wraps, misunderstood Under Wraps. What can I say about this? The music is just stunning. And I know there isn't a real drummer on it. In fact, the thing that was annoying me about it, just slightly, was the loud snare drum. It's not there all the time. I think it's a snare drum. I might have got the wrong sort of drum. But there's a loud drum. And I have the same problem with Prince's records. His music is too subtle to have that sort of banging drum going on. Similar with this, because it's a result of drum programming. And mostly the drumming's okay. Would it be better with a real drummer? Probably would. But the songs are great. And the music's quite different, as is the Jethro Tull way, from their other albums in a more marked way. It has a sort of 80s bassy feel, synth pop feel. Jean-Pierre Vertes contributes quite a lot to this album, his keyboards, and co-wrote some of the songs with Ian Anderson. But I like all the tracks. Lap of Luxury, Lap of Luxury, Radio Free Moscow. That's a great song. The Heat, Get Out of the Heat. An Apogee, of course, in which Ian Anderson sings, I see Tennyson and Wordsworth there, waiting for me in the cold, bleak air, or is it night air? Cold, thin air? Anyway. As a lyricist, Ian Anderson is pretty well unmatched in popular music generally, even. I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound sort of, don't want to over exaggerate, but he's comparable with Bob Dylan. And he has received a doctorate from a university for his writing. So I suppose he's a doctor of literature. And the lyrics of this are just gripping, engaging. What I was going to say, I think it's lush. The music's lush. It's rich, and one of the best bass guitar albums you'll ever hear. Must be David Pegg's finest hour, perhaps. There we have it. Under Wraps. Next one is, in some ways, the elephant in the room, in the views of some critics. But as was Under Wraps in some people's minds, I suppose. But this next one is also some people's number one. Jethro Tull album. And of course it's the wonderful A Passion Play. The first album that the band recorded after the aborted Chateau disaster episode. And of course it has some of the ideas and music from there on it. And what can I say? This is not the Stephen Wilson remix. Stephen Wilson usually does a great job remixing, but in some cases, well, I prefer the original mix, and this is one of those very rare cases in which I like the original mix more than the Stephen Wilson remix. This is a remaster from 2005, I think, or the early 2000s. And it's a concept album. It's where the band, for a couple of years, the band sort of deliberately did prog rock, I suppose, in that they came in to the camp of Genesis and Yes and other bands, Gentle Giant, perhaps. Gentle Giant weren't always that proggy. So Genesis, early Genesis and Yes, and early King Crimson. It's it's a continuous track, 40 minutes, but there is an interval, so it's not 40 minutes long, but there's an interval in which there's a narrated story, spoken mostly, about a hare who lost his spectacles, in which you have talking animals. It has a theme of finding, of seeking. Has a theme of seeking for something that you've already got, I suppose. Like the musk deer that ran all over the world, and wondering where the smell came from, and of course it was coming from its own body. But there's a kind of implied spiritual theme in the Hare Who Lost His Spectacles. But the rest of the album, the song, if you like, it is a song. Yes, it's a concept piece about a Ronnie Pilgrim. Well, that's the explanation of the album anyway. Ronnie Pilgrim, he dies, he goes through various afterlife experiences, and then at the end he comes back. I don't know whether it's by resurrection. Certainly Ian Anderson sings at the end, "Here am I, roll the stone away from the dark into ever day." Rolling the stone away, of course, refers to Jesus' tomb. And at the beginning he dies, a silver cord lies on the ground, he sings. It's a continuous piece, apart from the Hare Who Lost His Spectacles, which is quite funny as well. I suppose it's a bit of... There are comic relief bits in it. There's humour in it. Although the story is of this Ronnie Pilgrim guy, actually I always think of the Apostles' Creed, the death of Jesus, descending to hell, and then on the third day he rose again. So there's a kind of allegorical message on this. But that's the concept of story of Ronnie Pilgrim, his experiences in the afterlife. Now, Stephen Wilson's remix of this involved him editing out some of Martin Barr's guitar playing. Not much of it, but he edited some of it out. I don't know why. It was important to me when I used to listen to this album a lot. I still listen to it quite a lot. And he added a section of song which hadn't been included on the album release as well, which is kind of interesting, but I don't think it added much to the overall album. So this is the remastered version or edition of the Passion Play on CD. And in this one you can get the DVD facility you can use to watch the film that went with the story of the Hare Who Lost His Spectacles, which involves people dressed as different animals and all sorts of pagan imagery. And I think it's it's Jeffrey Hammond, dressed as the devil. He has horns and a pitchfork, narrating the story. And there are also ballerinas, which you occasionally got with videos involving Jethro Tull throughout, at least into the 80s, I know that. But during the live show, the they used to show this film at the back of the stage, perhaps, unless they played the incidental music, which would just flow in with the music of the rest of the album. They probably could go off and have a cup of tea. Or a drink of whiskey, depending on which was their poison, of course. There we have it. Beloved concept album. A beloved concept album of prog rock. A passion play. The next one is the TV special recording of Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die. Now, before you throw your hands up in sort of astonishment at how could I possibly put Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die above all those other albums, well, this is a TV special re-recording of it. It has the same album sleeve design, but in red lettering. It is red lettering. TV special recording, remixed to stereo by Stephen Wilson. And here, Stephen Wilson does some of his finest work in the remix. Now, it's not this album, the original release, transferred to CD. That was one of my least favourite Jethro Tull albums because the sound is a bit muggy. The musicians don't sound to be contributing very much to it. You couldn't hear the musicians clearly, but or the string quartet. But with this re-recording, everything's very clear, and there's more flute and drums. Martin Barr's clearly heard, and John Evan. John Glasscock's as great as ever on bass, and David Palmer's arrangement for the string quartet, which is one of his best arrangements, is clear as a bell as well. I've even put it above a passion play. It's so good, this one. I had to go on the internet mail order, one of the internet mail order sites to get this, but I guess it'll be in the big box set, which I haven't got yet, of Too Old to Rock and Roll, Too Young to Die, one of the new box set releases. Here we have it. It's the story of Ray Lomas, an aging rocker. The last one, the Passion Play one, was about Ronnie Pilgrim. This is the story of Ray Lomas. And he's an aging greaser with his life flashing before it. Fantastic. With the really gentle, subtle, checkered flag song at the end. Right. And I've even put it, as I said, above a passion play. It's so good. Because the band's playing better on it. Even the vocals are better. More convincing. The next one is the A album, or just A. Started life as an Ian Anderson solo album, and therefore it ended up with an entirely different lineup to the 70s lineups. He re-invited Martin Barr in though, so Martin Barr was still in, and he stayed with them till into the 2000s. Mark Craney on the drums, great rock drummer. David Pegg, of course, his first record debut, though he'd been in the band for a while, having replaced John Glasscock, who sadly passed away. And on top of that, of course, there's a great Eddie Jobson on keyboards. An entirely different kettle of fish to John Evans keyboards. I think he was much more flamboyant. And you hear his work on some Roxy Music albums and Frank Zappa album, and UK. I think he was one of the founding members of the band UK. And he's only on this Jethro Tull album, not on any the other Jethro Tull albums, just this one. And he also plays electric violin. And there's a solo on Uniforms, song called Uniforms. Great stuff. It's a complete departure from the albums that had medieval music. I say medieval music. Music that was like medieval music, because there isn't much medieval music extant, because people didn't write things down until Guido. When was that? Well, it's very much in the late medieval period. I don't think there was much written music before he came up with the 5 lines that we're all familiar with now, and the staves and the clefs and all the rest of it. But anyway, I'll come to more of that later. Come to that later about the music. This is more a prog rock album. It's not. It's more urban. It's not. It's not the ecological sort of. Well, it's got ecological concerns. There's a kind of warning of nuclear disasters on it. The sound is just great. Crossfire. Songs which ostensibly about political matters, but I'm not sure just how true it is to say that they are political songs. Lyrics are great. Just a great band. With this, I've got the release. I've got the Slipstream video on DVD in it with the A CD. And that, of course, that's another show altogether. It has some of these songs on it. There's live footage and all sorts of MTV style video representations of and accompanying songs going back in the band's repertoire. What to say about this? What else to say about this? Black Sunday, fan favourite, I think, from this. Great song. Kick off my lethargy, down to the gate with the old mood upon me. Get out and chase that small immortality, borning the minute of my next returning. Doesn't get much better than that. Excuse me while I just adjust the screen again. That's it. The next one, number 3. I've got 2 at number 2. 2 albums at number 2. So you're getting 11 for your money. Say for your money, I'm not getting paid for this. But number 3, or number 4 if you like, is everyone's favourite, or most people's favourite, I think, the Aqualung album. Aqualung from 1971. I think it was being recorded in 1970. And it's a mixture of hard rock and more folky sounds, gentler songs. Someone more than one person has remarked there's not a weak track on it. And that's true, there aren't any weak tracks on any of the albums that I've chosen for this list. But this one is rather special. It comes at the it comes at the culmination of, or it is the culmination of the band's early years, working through blues and then adding different influences. I think the first sort of, the most progressive album of the early band was Benefit. And there was this one, which has been regarded by some as a concept album. The band didn't agree that it was one. There are common themes running through some of the songs, but not all of the songs. But it is a great heavy album, and it's a great, and the light bits are very nice as well. Cheap Dirty Turn, Wandering Aloud, and Slipstream, which in terms of lyricism serves as a kind of linchpin of the entire album, really. But of course that's thinking of it as a concept album. Well, the conceptual parts of it, and the bits that aren't part of the concept of either the tramp, the homeless man, or the kind of rather bitter invective or invectives against organised religion. Of course, it all amounted to a critique of human society. The quiet ones, as I was saying, are sort of personal songs of Ian Anderson's, and I think Mother Goose's too, and perhaps Up to Me. But the interesting thing is that there's a sort of theatrical side to this, in that in his very early days, Ian Anderson had this image of being a tramp that has kind of jumped up on stage and started playing a harmonica. He kind of looked scruffy. He had a coat that his father had gave him to keep him warm when he left home. And there was a photo of him at a wedding with his flute. I don't know if it's strapped to his back or in his pocket, but his sneakers had a hole with the toe peeping through. So he had a kind of scruffy tramp image. He was an not only the anti-pop music in some ways, or an alternative to pop, to much of pop and rock. The appearance or the image of the band was kind of anti-pop star or even rock star, of course, image. And this album sort of emphasises that to those who know about it, I suppose. So in a way, Ian Anderson is the tramp, in a way. He's identifying with the tramp. And the second half of it now is not the second side, it's the second side of the LP. The second half of it could easily have been written by a tramp. There's kind of so much bitterness in it. Though I dare say it wasn't meant to be bitter. Excuse me. Start the screen out. What else can I say? Great heavy tracks, flawless playing. And great light moments as well. But Slipstream is particularly profound. When the lush separation unfolds you, and the product of wealth push you along on the byway of your spiritless undying self, and you press on God's waiter your last dime as he hands you the bill, and you spin in the slipstream, timeless unreasoning, paddle right out of the mess. And that's it, that's the entirety of Slipstream. It's just a short acoustic guitar-led track. Now we have it, the Aquila album. Now what could be better than that, you're thinking? Well, at number 2, I have a couple of albums, but I can't really put one above the other, that were recorded after David Palmer, who usually did the orchestral and string arrangements for the band, joined the band, became a touring member, and his contribution to the band was enormous, I think, or at least the kind of new musical working coincided with his becoming a member of the band. And the 2 albums are, and I've got the box sets here, the new box set presentations. That's let's see it. Songs from the Wood and Heavy Horses. See that? Heavy Horses, Songs from the Wood. Now these aren't distinct and separate albums, they're quite different in many ways, but they are a result in part of writing or writing for or to raise consciousness of ecology, not just natural ecology in both, yes. And there's a sort of English aesthetic in the music as well as the songs. This was present in Jethro Tull, especially during the 70s. Anyway, not only natural ecology in both, but also cultural ecology. I've got it wrong way around. Cultural ecology. There's a lot of folklore, myths and folklore. Like there's a Jack in the Green and the solstice bells. The Cup of Wonder refers to something regarded as a pagan rite, I suppose, passing the cup of wine round at a solstice ceremony. What else? There's a figure of the Whistler. Yeah. Not only cultural ecology, but in this one, not only natural ecology, but emotional ecology. These are the songs of a farmer, which the singer was when he made this album. I don't think he's remained once to this day, but he was a sheep and salmon farmer. And there you have it with the 2 wonderful horses of the title track. But this album gives you these animals. There are cats, giant beautiful horses, which I can particularly relate to because I used to live in rural Yorkshire, and I used to see these what we call shire horses. More than once a week, you'd see them trundle by, and they were huge. They were bigger than baby elephants. Of course, you don't see them as much these days. Half the countryside from then has been built up with housing estates and one thing and another. But there's a song about his son as well, No Lullaby, which sort of relates the story of how there there are always dangers out there. I'll sing you no lullaby. There's sort of dragons and beasties out there. And there's this great song Acres Wild. It's got music on it which I call the Dance of Ages. There's some of it on a passion play. It's like a folk jig, but it's in a particular style. And Ian Anderson sings, "Come with me to the winged isle, northern father's western child, where the dance of ages is playing still, through far marches of Acres Wild." Acres Wild, I think that's my favourite track. But they're all great tracks. I love every track on it, and it's a great album. It's been called his A.E. Houseman album, as he gets, with all the nature poetry in the songs, he comes pretty close to the English poets, particularly A.E. Houseman, of course. So that was the idea, but no more like A.E. Houseman than William Wordsworth. I tend to think of this as a kind of Vaughan Williams meets rock and roll album. But yeah, musicianship's great, everything's good. And the Stephen Wilson remix is an improvement on the original release. This one is much more sort of jolly, if you like. It's optimistic. It's fairly melodic. Heavy Horses has a sort of deeper music to it, more atmospheric music. But this is much more. In fact, one critic said that it was a pop album. A critic that very much sort of is interested in ABBA, music of ABBA, and bands like that. And it has been said and written that it could be the best album Jethro Tull ever made. Very little heaviness. It's definitely got the rock and roll, but very little heaviness. And at one point there is a very heavy passage, Martin Barr's electric guitar. But I think it's meant to be a bagpipe theme, played in a blues style. The song is about a man who's cuckolded. It's about the only sad song on the entire album, of course. And he's looking through the window at presumably his wife or his girlfriend, and she's entertaining another man. Anyway, there we have it. I nearly have these at number one. Nearly. In fact, I could swap them round with the number one very easily. Number one, what could be better than that? Well, it's not really better than that. It's just as good. And it's one of those albums that sort of came in its time and just took the world by storm. Maybe the best-selling album of Jethro Tull is, though popular opinion is that Aqualung is the best-selling album of the band. I looked in a discography, the one that was available on Wikipedia, and I found that Aqualung and two compilation albums from the band were platinum records, and the rest of them were gold. And then something was niggling in the back of my mind. When I dug more on the internet, Googled a bit, I found that Thick as a Brick had gone platinum in America. I also found out that the Passion Play had gone platinum in America. And War Child had gone platinum on pre-orders. So it was certified platinum before it was released on pre-orders. Unless everyone asked for their money back, I suppose it still was platinum afterwards. But anyway, Thick as a Brick now. I guess that, by the way, that there are many other platinum albums from the band because they were cited as the biggest band in the planet in the mid-70s. Anyway, back to this. Thick as a Brick. And you wise men don't know how it feels to be thick as a brick. As one of those devices that Ian Anderson uses on Songs from the Wood and War Child, in which he addresses his audience. Let me bring you songs from the wood, and I'll take you down to that bright city mile. And on this one, really don't mind if you sit this one out. My words but a whisper, my deafness a shout. So it starts off kind of quiet and folky and heats up. The whole thing just floats. Flows. The whole thing flows seamlessly throughout, and it's one complete song. No intervals, no interruptions, just a complete song, and you don't notice the time passing. It's so magical. Because it's meant to be a spoof of the concept album genre. After critics and others remarked that Aqualung was a concept album when the band did not agree that it was one. One of them said, let's make this next album into the mother of all concept albums, and this is it. Thick as a Brick. The spoof involved the entire lyric being written by Gerald Bostock. I think he's an 8-year-old boy. You see him there on the front on the newspaper with his, sorry, my finger. It's not like looking in a mirror, this. There he is, with his uncle and his aunt, presumably, or something, or maybe his dad. Yes. He's meant to have written this long poem called Little Milton by the press. Of course, the whole thing's just a spoof newspaper. And Royston Eldridge, who designed it, remarked on one documentary that it took longer to do the cover because it was a complete newspaper, many pages, than to make the album. Excuse me. Well, I'm always getting a dry mouth when I do these videos. Anyway, it's the first of the two long prog rock epics that Tull did. And this one has been acclaimed as, you know, the ultimate prog rock album. It's long form. It's longer form than any other at the time. There may have been more recently longer form songs. And there are time signature changes in it. If you listen to the song, after the initial song, Thick as a Brick, really don't mind if you sit this one out, addressing the audience, you know, Sandcastle virtues and so on. There's a passage where Ian Anderson sings, "Spin me back through the years to the days of my youth," and other lines after that. But then there's an image of a birth of a boy. But then there's suddenly a medieval scene in the lyric. The poet and the painter casting shadows on the water as the sun plays on the infantry returning from the sea. I think that the medieval scene is sort of representative of a more modern scene. Some people in their houses, you know, talk about their house as if it's a ship, or so I suppose they could talk about their house as though it's a castle. And there's a kind of rivalry between father and son, which is in one of Ian Anderson's earlier songs as well. But then there's some kind of invectives against society, and at the end, the album more or less fades out on the same notes that it fades in on the other side of the LP. Of course, the second half of this, more or less the same. There's an added bit just to complete the side at the end of side one, at the end of the first half. And there's halfway through the album, at the beginning of the second half, there's what I call interpret as the disintegration of culture. And this kind of rambling, long-form drum solo with some kind of dissonant saxophones and guitars and even a flute. The flute's not dissonant, the flute plays a little almost nursery rhyme-like tune as well. And then there's some spoken, rather surreal spoken lines as well in it. But I won't go into that. And then the rest of the song goes into other zones. In the first song, it keeps changing, but it flows effortlessly from one kind of musical and song zone to another. And at the end, there's a reiteration of a song, a couple of verses from a section of the first half, and then at the end, the very end, the song ends up where it started, with ride yourselves over the fields, make all your animal deals, and your wise men don't know how it feels to be thick as a brick. Excuse me. I'm just sorting the screen out. Now, a couple of mentions. First of all, live albums. There are quite a few live albums by the band. The available one in the 70s was the Bursting Out one, which is good. It was recorded during the Heavy Horses tour, or the tour on which they were playing the Heavy Horses songs. And since then, the set from the Isle of Wight in 1970 with the early band with Clive Bunker, but not with Mick Abraham, with Martin Barr on guitar, has been released. That's great. On CD, yeah. And since then, since the 70s, there's a very interesting live album called A Little Like Music, which was recorded on a tour, some of it which was in the Middle East. I don't know whether all of it was in the Middle East, but I don't think much of it was in this country, or even the States. But it's a kind of unplugged show. It sounds like an unplugged show. It sounds very acoustic, different versions of different songs, and some surprises as well. And with Dave Mattox on the drums, who was one of the great drummers that famously played in Fairport Convention. He's on the Legion Leaf album. He's on quite a few of the records. David Peck still on bass at that time. And of course, Martin Barr and Ian Anderson on guitars. That's an interesting album. And it was before the great trend of unplugged bands, which just about everyone you can think of subscribed to. There were seemingly hundreds of unplugged albums. Eric Clapton unplugged, and Eurythmics unplugged, and Rod Stewart unplugged. In fact, I could go on all day about it, but anyway, that's a good album. But the best one for me is one that was very recently released, but it was recorded during the tour during which the Songs from the Wood album was released, and it's called Skating on Thin Ice. So I'd recommend that one if you want a good live album from Jethro Tull. Compilations. Living in the Past from the early band. And I won't go into the details of that. And also, I haven't got my copy. I've got it on vinyl, but I haven't got my CD. Another compilation later called Nightcap, which has tapes from later on in the band's career. This is pre-Thick as a Brick. Nightcap is a bit post Thick as a Brick, Thick as a Brick, including the Chateau Disaster tapes that were never released as on record before. That's an interesting listen, and other recordings from a slightly later band. That's all I can say. I think I'd better leave it at that. I've been going on too long. So I intend to do some film reviews. I'm planning on doing a Marvel movie listing, ranking, and some book reviews. I haven't decided which books yet. More music reviews. So thank you for watching this video. I hope someone's watching it, because not many people have watched my videos yet. Please leave any comments below. I'd be interested to read them. Right, so bye-bye. Hope I'll see you again. If I can find the off button. Got it. Bye.